This is one of the most unique parts about what would be the Judeo-Christian tradition. It is really the belief that God's work in the world takes place through God's Spirit at work in God's people. And there are specific people who have some specific callings and some specific tasks and challenges. But there's not like more of the Spirit for some people than others. And there's not a sense that some people get away with only having a job while other people have a calling. That's like one of the big corrections that we want to get clear on, is that vocation is for all of God's people, because all of God's people are to say yes to Jesus. All of God's people have received the Spirit, and all of God's people are to participate in what God is doing to bring God's reign and rule, righteousness and justice, redemption and salvation to the world. And so it is meant for all people. And different people are in different locations. I mean, this is the place where you and I can say, praise be to God that there are people who envision their call to God's mission in the world in places like schoolrooms and boardrooms and courtrooms. Praise be to God that there are people who participate in what God is doing in the world by cleaning up rivers and making sure there's enough food for people to eat, and stepping into places of injustice, and of parenting children and caring for those who are disabled, and being doctors and nurses. And when we're filming this, like in the middle of a pandemic where we need people to be essential workers who are on the front lines, their call is important for them to see that as just as important as someone who would get up on a Sunday morning and preach, or someone who would step in alongside people and pray. We are all called to say yes to God's invitation to participate in God's work in the world. I think two of the themes that come out whenever we do this work on vocation and the formation of vocation, two themes that come out all the time. One is the deep belief we have to have that God knows us by name. Literally, the scriptures have an idea of literally imagery of our names being etched on the palms of God's hand, that we are known, and that we are known as part of a larger community that's bigger than ourselves. So the goal of continually understanding what God is doing in the world is to hear yourself personally addressed to something bigger than yourself, bigger than your location, bigger than the people who look like you and think like you. It is more diverse. It is larger. It is more encompassing. We are the greatest affirmation and satisfaction and meaning we will find in life is to give our whole self to something much bigger than ourselves. And so the whole point about being in a cohort is you want to hear multiple voices that are as diverse as possible to help you find your bit to play in this huge, powerful play. One of my favorite lines that comes from Walt Whitman is, "The powerful play goes on and you get to contribute a verse." And I think that one of the things that I want to say as a Christian is God is at work far beyond us, and you are really important. There's something for you to do in the middle of it. And you're only going to be able to participate in that as you understand your name being called to something bigger than your social location, your background, your family, your tribe, your group. It is something much larger than you can imagine. It's that combination that we have to hold for us all the time. What I want to encourage is any person who is watching this video is probably sitting in one of our cohorts, which means that you have already had God speak to you. And what I want you to believe with all your heart is that we have a God who speaks and a God who continues to speak. That nudge you felt to say yes to be in this cohort, that's the work of the Spirit. And I want you to believe that this work of discerning your vocation is really important to God. God wants you to know that. God created you to take your place in his mission in the world. God's at work and God is speaking. And so I want you to know that that's deeply important, and you're deeply important. And so, even if you find yourself in a very challenging situation, if you can really believe that you are not alone in it and that God will continue to lead and guide you, it is the very best thing. The second thing I want you to really know is you are already loved before you have accomplished anything. We know this because Jesus learned this lesson. Before Jesus did a miracle, before he preached a sermon, before he confronted a power, before he cast out a demon, before he did anything at all, he went down to the river to be baptized and heard, "You are my beloved child, in whom I am well pleased." Eugene Peterson's version has it as, "You are the pride of my life." And I want every person to know that before you have accomplished anything, and before you have figured all this out, and before you have even said yes fully to God, God has already fully said yes to you. You are already beloved. And so every single thing we're doing in this formation is a response to that love and that call that starts as a call of love to you and an affirmation of who you are, and now invites you to participate wholeheartedly, fully, just as you are, in God's work and mission in the world.